Hello and welcome to the Cognitive Security Institute. Today's speaker will be Thea Mannix, the Director of Research for Praxis Security Labs. Thea will be presenting Bridging the Gap: How Behavioral Science Professionals Can Communicate the True Potential of Social Sciences in Cybersecurity. As a behavioral neuroscientist, Thea has had substantial experience in experimental design, scientific testing, data visualization, and interpretation. As the Director of Research at Praxis Security Labs, an innovative security management software company, Thea uses her knowledge of both neuroscience and psychology to help further understanding and scientific assessment of human factors in cybersecurity. And with that, I will turn it over to Thea.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming to this talk. I'm very excited to be able to discuss this topic particularly with people that are in my industry and that are probably struggling with exactly the same thing as I am. I often give this talk in a slightly different format to cybersecurity industry professionals. So this is going to be very interesting for me. So what I'm looking at actually specifically with this talk is to discuss how we communicate what we can actually do for people on the ground compared to what we actually produce in terms of providing scientific evidence for what works and what doesn't. So this is always the first screen that I put up if I ever give a talk to cybersecurity professionals. Now, this number changes every year, and every year it actually goes up every time. And I found this number particularly interesting this year because this is actually from the World Economic Forum Global Risk Report. So they're not actually specifically experts in cybersecurity, they're just risk report experts. And so we've got 95%, which seems a bit of a dodgy number to me, considering that the statistics, we give 5% as a reasonable margin of error. So we're looking at a best or a worst case scenario in this case of very, very much. So this is why psychology is important in cybersecurity. And this is one of the messages that we need to get across to industry professionals, is that they are very, very good at securing the tech side of things. And that's actually what this number tells us. Cybersecurity professionals are really, really competent at securing the technological side of cybersecurity because upwards of 90% of cybersecurity incidents are now attacking the human element because this is something that they haven't actually secured. And one of the major issues that we have to overcome, that we have to help them overcome, is that while they're very proud of that situation, and we are very proud of our front wall, and we're securing the front wall and we're building the front wall, they're coming in the back door. And nobody really wants to look at that. And there's several reasons for this that I have discovered in the 2.5 years that I have been a cybersecurity professional. Some of the reasons for this are there is an enormous gap in the evidence-based research that we produce as academics and what is actually being implemented with regards to human factors in cybersecurity. So the main point to bring home about that is that what they are doing in regards to human factors in cybersecurity is they're providing them with knowledge, so security awareness training, and they do the wrong thing. So this is generally what people tend to be doing. And we know that both of these things are important, potentially, but on their own are completely useless. There is really poor communication channels between researchers, clinicians, which are also very important, and also industry professionals. And this means that we don't really have a channel to communicate with these people. Nobody has put an onus on either us or them to communicate with each other. We all live in our little silos and we produce our work, and it's becoming every day that gap is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger, and we need to find a way to communicate with each other. One of the reasons that's really challenging is because we have limited cross-subject expertise and common terminology. So they're using, particularly the cybersecurity industry in particular, is very, very guilty of coming up with lots of nice new terminology that means something that they don't tell anyone else what it means. And that's how they communicate with themselves. They have a little internal language that people coming from the outside don't have necessarily access to straight away. And we also do this actually as psychologists. We also do this within the field of psychology. As we know, psychology is a huge umbrella. It encompasses myself as a neuroscientist. It encompasses social psychologists, clinical psychologists, organizational psychologists, educational psychologists. And we all use different terminologies and expertise based on our education. And this is not common fault. So when we do actually make a channel and attempt to talk to each other, this tends to go a little bit awry, because everyone's sitting there smiling and nodding at each other and nobody really knows what anybody means. We also have differences in educational expertise and a lack of appreciation for those differences in expertise. So as much as certainly by the end of my talk, you're going to feel like psychologists are coming in to save the day and we're going to tell you how to do things and we're going to secure your human factors cybersecurity defense. In reality, I can't really do that because I don't have the expertise that you have in technology as a cybersecurity professional. So really, it's about, rather than setting up a competing, either human factors or own tech, what we need to do is come together and find a way to communicate with each other about those things. So I'm going to start off with issues that you can have with communication with cybersecurity industry professionals. And the number one issue that I have found that psychologists fall for, sociologists fall for, and also completely unwillingly cybersecurity industry professionals are a party to is the following. It's called technology goggles. I have come up with this term myself, and I'm going to explain what that means. So in order to view a psychological problem, what technologists tend to do, people that have come from a technology background, is that they can look at it, they don't really understand it, but then they put on these goggles of technology and then they're like, oh, you know what? Yeah, I can kind of understand where you're coming from. And this is a really big problem because they're not actually dealing with the issue, they're dealing with the method of delivery of the issue. So I'll go into what I mean now. So one of the reasons why this has happened is because human factors has been a very sudden and meteoric impact on cybersecurity professionals themselves. These people, these professionals, these extremely competent, intelligent people were not expected to understand human psychology upwards of, 5-10 years ago. And absolutely nobody thought that they would need to have this information, that they would need to be able to manage, how do you socially engineer people to do the right thing? This was not expected of them. A lot of these people also have grown up have become professionals either through a technological or a management background. So they're not in psychology at all. They have no psychological training, and there was no expectation that they should have that until very, very recently. So what happens is they tend to view psychological problems through technological glasses. I'm going to give you an example that I like to give to cyber technology professionals to show them exactly what I mean. So I say to them, cows and sheep eat vegetation, tigers and lions eat meat, humans and dogs eat both vegetation and meat. What animal is able to eat both meat and vegetation? This is a very simple question, right? And I give them three options. I say humans, tigers, or sheep. So we give this thing. It's obviously humans, right? This is a really obvious question. And then I tell them, no, actually, that's not what I said. I actually meant hedgehogs. And they go to me like, but you didn't give that as an option, right? That wasn't an option in the test. So what are you talking about? And I'm like, yeah, you know what? This is something that you're doing regularly in your security awareness training, is that you are fencing people in by what you don't say. And this is something I have seen time and time again, both in vendor and also internally created security awareness programs. Phishing is like phishing, but with the phone, and smishing is like phishing, but with the SMS. And they say, which ones can you use to attack your organization? And they say, oh, well, it's smishing and phishing. And you go, yes. And then suddenly, maybe a month later, somebody contacts them through WhatsApp or Slack or some sort of internal training, something, or somebody gets into your internal communication system and they say, well, you never told us about that. You never mentioned that. That wasn't an option on my training. But the thing is, because I've already shown them this example, they feel tricked. I get to this point and they go, like, you've tricked me into this. Like, you didn't give me an option. And I'm like, yeah, but you're also not giving your employees an option. So whilst we're giving them knowledge which is useful. I'm not saying it's not useful. We're giving them knowledge about the different methodologies we can use to deliver social engineering. What you've also done accidentally is created a new vulnerability, because now many of them will think there is no other option available. If you could get me through Slack, you would have included slashing in this training. Now, what they can do is consult an educational psychologist, or they can consult a neurolinguist or a linguist who can tell them the manner in which you present this information is really important. And actually, what's as important as what you do say is what you don't say. Giving people examples, particularly in the cyberspace, especially in the industry space, is really, really important. And actually giving them an example first before you actually give them the point of what you're talking about is really important. Because there is an assumption when you say, well, it's about what you don't say. People can understand that. People aren't stupid. They have a comprehension of that. A lot of this is considered common sense, right? But actually they won't realize it, because the minute they think, I know exactly what you're talking about, you've kind of lost them, because they don't really. They have a lot of assumptions that they're then feeding with the information that you're giving them. If you can trick them, you can show them how they're tricking people that they're actually supposed to train inadvertently, completely inadvertently. The other thing that I feel is really important to explain to people, perhaps using such an example, but you can think of your own as well, is that knowledge does not equal behavior. So a huge number of industry professionals, as I have experienced it, use knowledge assessments as measures of secure behavior within their organization. And we know as psychologists that just because you know the right thing to do doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to do it. And in fact, most of us on a daily basis consistently do things that we absolutely know we shouldn't do, but we do them anyway. Motivation, activity, emotional responses, all of these different kind of interactive, how much attention span you have left from the day, all of this interacts with the decision at that moment to make a good or a bad decision. Knowledge is not enough, but knowledge is very attractive for a cybersecurity industry professional because it gives you a number. They either know it or they don't, and they're really used to this as some binary stuff, right? And they're trying to demonstrate to people who don't understand any of this stuff. So we're talking about their board, we're talking about other industry professionals that do not have formal education. Many of them don't have formal education. How do I measure if I'm doing well or not? And this is a really, really easy way to do that. Do you know what phishing is or not? Yes or no? And it gives them a number. And there's comfort in that. It's a comforting number. We're doing really well. But for them to understand that knowledge does not equal behavior, we do not have the time to actually give them psychology degrees in order for them to understand that. So the one way that I do it is to give them very, very clear, plain, normalized examples. So depending on the audience I'm talking to, obviously, sometimes I say things like, I know I shouldn't run that red light, like it just turned red and I probably shouldn't do it, but you know what, I'm going to risk it because I'm in that kind of mood. You could get run over by a truck, you could hit a child. What are you doing? This is not a good risk assessment. But in that moment, that's who you were, right? Another day you won't behave like that. At the same time, I'm, over 30 years old. I definitely shouldn't drink more than 2 glasses of wine. I know this information. And yet, do I behave that way? Not always. Probably at a twice a year cadence, I forget about that information, conveniently. So giving them examples in their everyday life of how knowledge does not equal behavior actually provides them with a really good starting point to understand that simply teaching people this is the right thing to do, this is the wrong thing to do, does not actually equal behavioral consequence. So this is one of the things that a lot of them do not understand, that actually I would say in the first meeting that you have with them, you need to explain to them, because you say, what metrics do you have? And they'll say one of two things. They'll say, I've got knowledge, we've got a knowledge assessment. So we assess our training, and we also have phishing simulation assessments. The primary issue, as I see it in cybersecurity in industry, is that we have 3 different branches. So we have technology, so the tech that we're using, we have the process that we're using, so that would be like the policies that are influencing the technology and the people, and then we have the people, so we try to look at how we can fit these three things in together. The problem with technology goggles is that, I will give you a really good example that I have now. We love teaching people about the different types of technology that can be used to access them for social engineering, right? This is why we've come up with the terms like vishing, smishing, phishing, right? They can get you through an email, they can get you through an SMS, they can get you through a voice message. And the reality actually of that message is, if you can be communicated with, you can be socially engineered. That is the message that you actually want to send your employees, because there's new technology coming up all the time. But the focus is on technology because we have the tech goggles on, right? Vishing, smishing, phishing. And in reality, if I was being attacked with a knife, if I knew the type and brand of knife, that is useful information for me to understand that knives can be dangerous. That's useful information, right? But it doesn't actually deal with the problem at the moment, because the problem that's actually causing me to do behavior that I shouldn't be doing is social engineering, which you haven't protected me against. What we're protecting people against is the modes of translating that social engineering to us. I don't really care about the vehicle. We need to protect people against the actual attack itself. And the way that we can do that is by trying to help people shift the idea that technology is the focus of these three things. That we have technology and we need to make people fit into technology, and we need to make process fit into technology. And whatever happens with these two, well, whatever, that's kind of their problem. And this is a really bad attitude, because as you know, as I'm talking to everybody here, people that are in the psychology business or understand human behavior, trying to get, for example, 500 employees across a global entity that is existing in 14 different cultures, that have 14 different sets of skills and IT literacy and ages, to fit into a certain technology behavior, is a lot harder than actually going and reassessing the technology and saying, how can we get this to fit standard human behavior? How can we get this technology to be the easiest thing they could possibly do, aka more or less assuring most people will do it? And it's because they don't understand. Cybersecurity experts do not understand the complexity and the unpredictability of a human at an individual level. And this we need to express to them. Because right now we're trying to fit a human into a shape, and every time we try and fit them in, they're a different shape. And they don't understand. They're going, why is this not working? If they're asking why it's not working, we're not explaining it well enough. That's my opinion. So we need to figure that out. Another one, an example that I use often that I find goes down very well actually with technologists that have no interest in listening to me, is understanding user behavior in software. And I like to give them the example, although it is very vague, of how much energy we have in a day to dedicate to paying attention to things, actually engaging, right? Using our higher cognition. We don't do that all day. We spend most of our time walking around passively engaging with the world. The world sort of happens to us, and it has to be something quite exciting for me to bother using any energy on it. And yet what we ask for as an industry is vigilance. Right? Vigilance actually requires quite a lot of energy from us. And yet we have a lot of technological solutions, particularly within the cybersecurity industry, that cost people a lot of energy. Right? So for example, we can look at task switching. So, you want to log into this. Okay, well now you're actually going to have to log into your whatever password manager. I'm going to need to copy and paste that in. Oh, it's not working. Okay, you do need your 2F MFA. You need your MFA. Where is your phone? You left it in the kitchen. Depends where you are. I mean, we are costing people a huge amount of energy for no reason. Why are we not generating cybersecurity solutions that are actually integrated into people's jobs? People are not employed to do security. Most people are not employed to do security. And this is something that a lot of cybersecurity professionals, if you actually say that out loud, get a little bit of a shocked face, which is a bit surprising. They go, oh, that's not their job. Their job isn't there to do security. Their job is there to do marketing, to do, I don't know, write reports, to operate machinery, to make sure that certain programs are running correctly. I mean, this is that their primary job there is productivity. It's not security. And if you pitch security against productivity, in the vast majority of cases in the industries that I've been in, productivity will win every single time. You would love a situation where if they can't log on to the VPN, they don't log on to the VPN. They don't go into their work documents. They don't work because it's not a safe environment. But if somebody's expecting something at 12 o'clock tomorrow, you know what? Unless you've communicated that message to them correctly, you don't do this. They're going to chance it. They're going to chance it. People need to assess whether their technology, and we're not just talking about security technology, whether their technology is user-friendly, because this is actually a security vulnerability. And this is something else that I'd like to point out to everybody. We are, and I myself am very loath to start comparing computers with brains, because they are definitely not the same thing. And there is a tendency for us to want to do that, particularly with the onset of AI and neural networks and things. But actually, in places where you can use terminology that's familiar for cybersecurity professionals, I would recommend that we do it. So for example, I can say that poor mental health is a security vulnerability. We have evidence for this. And when you say security vulnerability, people get very excited because they're like, well, I know what that is. And you've just talked to me for an hour and you've said a million words. I don't know what they are. And it's not because they're stupid. It's not because, they're idiotic or they're unwilling to learn. It's because they come from a completely different area of expertise than us that has been completely siloed from human factors for many, many, many years since its inception. This is what we're trying to adjust. If you're going to come in as a behavioral scientist in any form, so whether you're a social scientist, organizational psychologist, neuroscientist, to an organization and try to help them with their cybersecurity, the one thing that you need to make sure that they understand is organizational culture and the potential role of organizational culture in cybersecurity as a general concept. This is also going to seriously affect the way that you communicate with people within the organization. So I'm almost sure I'm not the only one. I come into an organization and we're there with the IT department and they are put in the basement somewhere or they're put in a high tower. They're completely siloed off from the rest of the organization. And they're like, I don't understand why any of this is happening, right? So some of them might say, for example, we have, generally good results in the metrics we have, but we've got a pocket here that's not working. I've got a pocket over here that for some reason isn't doing what they're supposed to do. And my reaction is to say to them, what have you considered organizational culture? And their response to me almost inevitably is, I love working here. I have the best time. My boss is amazing. We have a great culture. And you think, I'm so happy for you. The idea that you think that is generalizable to everyone else in the organization, though, is kind of we've got a problem. The lack of understanding about how people operate on a group level for me, has been astonishing. But over time, I've realized that this is not the fault, actually, of the cybersecurity industry professionals. This is the fault of the way that cybersecurity has been treated for many, many years, which is something that goes on in the dark, in a back room, by someone who's cleverer than you. And you might see them at the Christmas party once a year. But basically, you're in charge of keeping everyone safe. Well, now suddenly, keeping everyone safe involves literally everybody in the organization. It involves considering psychological principles that you've never heard of. Right? It involves suddenly having to engage HR, right? With whom potentially, and actually fairly often, the cybersecurity portion of the company has had issues with before on a social level. We have to have HR in the fold if we're going to change organizational culture, if we're going to change security culture. We have to include HR. You need to get the whole organization on board with cybersecurity changes because we need to implement them as a part of your daily work life. We can't have them as extra little things that you might do for the organization. And that's a big ask of often a single cybersecurity professional. with a very limited budget and people that are not interested in listening to them. And you suddenly come in and say, well, it's a very easy solution. All you have to do is engage HR and convince the entire organization to change how they do things. So this was one of the very early lessons that I learned. I can't come in off the bat and say that to them because that's completely overwhelming. They can't possibly single-handedly change the organizational culture of where they're in. What I wanted to deliver to them was an idealized vision based on the research that I had of what a secure organization looks like. And the problem was with me that I completely underestimated the resources and knowledge and availability of those people to actually implement those changes. So what we actually need to do when we go into these things is listen initially more than we talk, and to try and determine what is the organizational culture here. What is the culture towards security as a general theme? What kind of major demographic are we looking at? Are we looking at IT professionals? Are we looking at people that, sort of work machinery? Are we looking at construction workers? Are we looking at HR representatives? Trying to help cybersecurity professionals implement the best changes they can based on the environment that they're in, rather than trying to go in and then paying us a lot of money to go, this is what an ideal utopia would look like. Okay, thank you very much. Now I'm leaving. This is not useful information. We need to work with them. And part of that is an onus on us to promote the idea that we are not coming in here as white knights. We're not Gandalf on the third day coming over the ridge. We are here to help you from stumbling around in the dark, trial and erroring all of these different things to try and influence human behavior. We're here as a support network, but we can't do it without you. And we're not expecting to come in and do it overnight either, right? This is a long-term project, and it's something that we need to actually officiate our communication on. And this is a two-way street. Communicating with social science professionals, one of the things that I have actually started doing is asking industry professionals, what are the issues you face if you are communicating with a social science professional? So sometimes these are behavioral scientists, sometimes these are organizational psychologists. They actually span the length and breadth of the umbrella. So nobody take individual offense, please. But we have differences in educational expertise. There's a lot that we assume as social scientists is common sense. So we assume a lot of knowledge whilst we're speaking to people. And I think the threshold at which we do that is far too high for most people because of the issue that I've just discussed, where they are actually existing in a silo. They've been in their little technology bubble. They haven't been expected to deal with people really on a social level at all. And suddenly we come in and we start talking about things like biases and, sort of risk perception. And these are things that people think they know about because they know what those words mean, but actually they have no expertise in whatsoever. We need to talk to people at the level of somebody who has no idea what we're talking about without talking to them like they're stupid people, because they're not. They're highly intelligent people. And one of the huge benefits that we have is that a lot of the people that are currently very senior in cybersecurity are self-taught individuals. And this is an opportunity for us because they're self-taught. So they're willing to learn. The fact that they're even talking to you shows that they are at a maturity level that is far beyond the majority of the industry. And we need to be able to communicate with those people. It's not just the fact that they need to be able to listen to us. We need to be able to communicate with them on a level that makes sense. Yeah, this is my point. We are obligated to share our findings with those who actually need to implement it. So some of the questions that I'd like people to talk about at the end of my talk is how do we encourage communication, actually? Do we just start sort of randomly calling people, or how do we go about doing that? And how do we avoid these pitfalls that I've discussed here? So if anybody has any ideas, that's me. Thank you very much.